The Jamie Dyer Show.
Absolutely delighted to be joined today on the telephone by Elf Lyons, and this is going to be quite interesting. She's coming to the Brighton Fringe very soon, and she's here today to talk about her show Swan. But before that, we were having quite an interesting conversation before this interview started, and I need to ask you, for those who aren't familiar, how would you describe your comedy?
I would say it is very eccentric, chaotic, pop culture, clown sabotage. That sounds really, really pretentious. I'm trying to think of all the words that convey just how much mess I tend to cause on stage. It's silly. It's really silly. It's silly and fun and light. Yeah, light.
Well, there
sort
is
of popcorn.
Well, yes, there's definitely a mix of ideas there. I mean, you told me that you're dressed. You do a lot of dressing up in your act, don't you?
Yes. So with Swan, in Swan, I'm dressed up in a parrot costume, which I bought online, and there's a whole array of costumes that I sort of make out of things that I found at the local 99p shop, and I love just giving myself a challenge of going, right, I want to try and look like a vampire. How can I look like a vampire using the things that I found today from the local, charity shop? And then I come up with that character. So right now, I'm dressed up as Igor from Young Frankenstein, and I'm just stuffed full of loads of bits and pieces to give myself a massive hump, and I've got tights on my forehead currently. This isn't for Swan, this is for another show that I'm developing. But I like creating, it's like that silly, when you're little and you just want to dress up and look like somebody else.
Yes, do you find, it's very, very resourceful, I must give you that. Is it purely visual, or do you also speak as well?
Yes, I'm a very speaky comic. So Swan is, I always wanted to create, I always wanted to do Swan Lake, because when I was little I always wanted to be a ballet dancer. So I thought, right, I'll try and create Swan Lake. And I thought, to give myself a bit more of a challenge, I'll try and do it in French. So I don't speak French, but I love the sound of the French language. So I Google translated my script and tried to learn it in French as best I could. And so I do the whole show, I perform all the ballet, all the different characters, and I sort of speak in Franglish whilst dressed as a parrot.
I mean, this sounds awesome, and it was nominated at Edinburgh Comedy, wasn't it, for best show?
Which was it's a really exciting feeling, because I'm 26, and there's, when you're doing anything, or if you're taking a risk with whatever job or work you're doing, and I knew doing a Swan Lake clown show was going to be a sort of hard sell. And I sort of in my heart thought, well, maybe no one will come, but I really love this show and it makes me happy. The audiences who are seeing it are really happy. So that is the most important thing. And then the fact it took off the way it did has just been, it was such a lovely confidence booster, in your own abilities. But the reaction to the show has been so overwhelming and really fun. And it's a really, when you have those days and you go, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? It's quite nice to look back at that and go, no, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. That was a lovely, lovely feeling. And the fact the show went as well as it did.
And the fact that you're getting applauded for dressing up as a parrot.
Yes, the fact that this costume that was an online drunk misdemeanor on Amazon has turned into being a really great tax-deductible creative expense. Though I have to admit, I've gotten through so many Swan parrot costumes in the last year from doing the show, because the show has such an intense amount of mess. Well, not originally, but it's sort of the show develops. The show is largely improvised, so every time I do the show, it is different, and I always bring in a new prop for every show I do. So as the show has developed and grown, I've had to get new parrot costumes each time, because the wear and tear gets more and more intense and severe.
It must be really difficult then to kind of improvise each show. When you say props, what do you mean?
So, for example, when I went to Australia to do the show, I wasn't able, because of baggage and luggage allowance, I wasn't able to bring a huge array of the props I'd made back in the UK. It didn't make practical sense. So when I got to, and then also a few bits and pieces were actually confiscated because I didn't really take into account Australian agriculture and fire risks. So some things I couldn't bring through. So when I arrived in Perth at 5 a.m. that morning. My show was at 9 p.m. that evening, and I only had the parrot costume and 45 bras, which are for a magic trick. So I had to try and think, right, how can I recreate all the other things? So I got some pool noodles, so I found 3 of those, and they were really useful. There was an old dilapidated fan, like for air conditioning, that was in the back of the venue, and we attached loads of white plastic bin bags to it and decorated them so they looked like swans. So when you turned it on and it would flow around the room, it looked like there were lots of swans. I found loads of bubble wrap to make the lake. We just, and then on the day, sometimes I'd ask the audience what they've got in their handbags or if there's anything that they can use to create certain effects. iPhone torches work to great advantage when you've got limited lighting. So at one point, my technician, who was the loveliest man but most inept, called Hayden, he'd never worked in tech before. He did a full-on blackout and turned off all the power in the building, and so we had to use all the torches from people's iPhones to do a spotlight so I could create one particular effect. So it's very resourceful because you're thinking, how can I create the dream show on as minuscule a budget as possible?
Yeah, I have so many questions, but I really need to ask you about the gig at the Comedia. Have you performed there before?
I've done a few spots at the Comedia with Funny Women or Casual Violence. I've done a few gigs there, but I've never done a full solo show at the Comedia before. So it's always been a personal goal and dream of mine. So it is really, really, really exciting. I wanted to say a word that I probably can't use on the radio, but I'm really excited about performing.
Yes, it's part of the Brighton Fringe as well. Have you done the Fringe before?
Yes, I did my first ever 40-minute show when I was about 21, 22, at upstairs at 3 and 10, I believe. Oh, goodness, I can't even remember the venue. It was really lovely, but, it was my first ever time doing a solo show. It was called Elf Lyons as a Pervert, and I was still sort of finding my feet with comedy then and working out what I wanted to do. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to coming back to the Brighton Fringe. And also there are so many good acts there this year. It's incredible.
Yes, how important do you think the Brighton Fringe is for an act like yourself?
I think the Brighton Fringe is incredibly important. Like all fringe festivals are important and valuable because also it's bringing a lot of experimental and new art forms in an affordable way to new audiences. And especially there's lots of Australian comics I know coming to the Brighton Fringe before going on to Edinburgh, and it is an amazing jump pad for them to showcase their work, experiment and develop their work. We don't really, comedy and theatre, it's all about play and it's all about experimentation and taking risks. And to have these festivals where you have that opportunity to perform to open-minded audiences, and especially Brighton is such a fantastic creative city, I think it's really important. And it's really important as well that audiences take risks and they choose to see something that they wouldn't necessarily go and see any other weekend, or pick something that they think they might not necessarily enjoy, because it's about opening your mind to all the developing ways that theatre and comedy is growing. And so, yes, I'm very passionate about fringe festivals, and they're really important for the economy of theatre and comedy development.
I think you're right there, and I think it's certainly interesting, and obviously you're bringing Swan to the Comedia on the 22nd and 23rd of May, which is very, very exciting. What's after this show? Because I think you've said that you're kind of doing the last run of this show. What's next for you?
So I'm developing my new show at the moment called Chiff Chaff, which is a one-woman musical about the economy. And I'm taking that to Edinburgh, and I'm doing that at the London Clown Festival. And that's the new show after Swan. So all the things that I learned from Swan are now gone, right, okay, cool. How can I get better? What can I challenge myself with? What can I scare myself with? So the next steps seem to be musicals and economics. So I'm doing that, and then I'm also developing a show at the Nuffield Theatre in Southampton with their Laboratory Association, and we're doing a horror show, a one-woman show called Medusa, about Medusa's life up until her death by Perseus. And so, yeah, there's lots of bits and pieces going on at the moment.
Yeah, you sound incredibly busy. If people wanted to find out more about you, where would they need to go?
So I've got a website called, and please don't cringe, it was the fact that I couldn't get I just wanted it to be elflyons.com, but it's www.theelflyons.com. So that has all the details of my gigs. Also on Facebook, I've got a page called Elf Lyons, and that I regularly post up on that. I've also got Instagram, Elf Lyons, and Twitter, so I'm regularly tweeting about, sometimes last-minute surprise gigs come up, or really bizarre little events or immersive theatre experiences, and then I put those up there. So, yeah, that is the best way to work out what I am doing.
Yes, if people were a little bit unsure about coming, what would you say to them?
Take a risk and come. Some people have said to me, they didn't know what to expect. They didn't really like the idea of a clown. And you see the parrot costume and you think, you have certain preconceptions. But then it's very different to what you think it's going to be. It's not how the poster suggests it's going to be. But it's a proper grown-up. Yeah, I think grown-up. I think people expect it to be children's theatre, but it's not. It's a proper raucous. Sometimes it's quite sexy, and sometimes it's quite scary, and it's quite my comedy partner Ryan's interjecting and trying to see what I'm saying about Swan. It's just a chaotic, fun adult mess, and everybody gets to get involved. And you don't worry about audience interaction if you're quite nervous about that type of thing. I'm a very kind and friendly performer.
Well, I'm sure a few people are a little bit more calm about the situation, and But no, thank you so much, Elf Lyons, for coming on today. Obviously, you're performing at the Comedy Studio on the 22nd and 23rd of May. Tickets are available now. That is for the Brighton Fringe. Thank you for coming on. You've made me feel a lot better about my drunken misdemeanours.
Oh, good. That is what I want to bring out to people. It's okay to make mistakes on the internet. Lovely chatting to you, Jamie.
Yes.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
The Jamie Dyer Show.